Stand in our way, and our golden age has just begun.
This is Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
Now it's time for everyone to understand what America First truly means.
Welcome to the Second American Revolution.
Well, folks, we're back here, Human Events Daily, Washington, D.C., on such a week as this. You know, folks, when President Trump won the biggest election of our lifetimes, he promised that the economy would be popping within months of him taking office. And boy, was he serious, especially when it comes to gold. In April, gold shattered its all-time high when it hit $350 per ounce. Silver is on the rise, too. And with the way things are looking, especially with the uncertainty of war, the sky's the limit. That's precisely why President Trump declared earlier this month that he will not be placing tariffs on gold. There's no stopping the precious metals market, and that's why I partnered with Allegiance Gold. Look, whether you're a collector looking for the best pricing in the precious metals space or you're looking to protect your family's future, it doesn't matter if it's $5,000 or $5 million, now is the time to act. Just go to protectwithposo.com to get started. Look, Allegiance Gold has the top ratings in the industry. I've been partnered with them for years, and when you go to protectwithposo.com or call 844-577-POSO, you can move part of your 401k, IRA, or savings into real physical gold and silver. And you may qualify for up to $5,000 in free silver. And with the way the market is looking, that free silver could be worth a lot more by the time it arrives securely at your doorstep. Call 844-577-POSO or visit protectwithposo.com. That's 844-577-7676 or protectwithposo.com. It's smart, secure, and simple. Call 844-577-7676. All right, so to go through some more of this story and just to offer another perspective on what's going on and what we're seeing coming out of Minneapolis, I knew I had to bring on my favorite anti-communist, ladies and gentlemen, once again, Evita Duffy.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
So, Evita, you know, obviously there's been a lot said about this situation already. I wanted to get your take on just how has it come as a society? And it's, you know, you and I have talked about from the very first time we started having you on the program about how the church is once again coming under attack. You told us stories from your family's own history about times in the past when these dark, demonic forces have targeted believers, targeted your family personally, and now here we are less than 100 years later in another time and place, and yet it's all happening again.
I mean, Jack, this is such a stark example of the spiritual battle that we're in. Sometimes we get overwhelmed by the political intrigue, Democrat versus Republican, and who's it going to be? And we forget about how deeply spiritual this is, from the way that this individual was depicting explicitly demonic imagery before this tragic attack. You have the way Democrats responded to it by attacking prayer. And then you have the way transgender activists have responded. I want to read a few of these to you, Jack. This is from Andy No, compiling just some of the commentary from trans activists online. More dead Christians, LOL. Future religious extremists dying isn't a bad thing. Won't someone please think of the poor innocent Christian transphobes that just want trans people dead? What is happening is so deranged. And as a response on the left, attacking prayer, defending the transgender mentally ill identity of the individual who did the attacking. It is so depraved, it's so backward, and really the only answer, Jack, is demonic possession itself, which they're denying.
And so when we look at some of the new data coming out here, you know, it's very clear. This is someone who is obviously a very troubled individual, and someone who, you know, there's that phrase that we always use, and it's such a turn of phrase, but it's right in our own vocabulary. They say wrestling with his own demons. So we say they're wrestling with their own demons. Well, where does that phrase come from? that phrase comes from the exact expression of how a demon, a demonic influence, actually can influence our minds and influence our lives, because it's a struggle. And in this case, it is a struggle that this person lost because they invited the demonic into their lives, and you can see the chaos of this man's personal life really being spilled out. It seems that the parents had split up, given the fact that the mother is down in Florida. The police can't seem to get a hold of her yet. She's lawyered up, and I'm waiting to see what that means, right? So she's lawyered up. Okay, we'll see what's happening, but she seems to have moved out of the picture, and there were some writings in the manifesto itself that seemed to be messages to other siblings talking about we need to forgive mom, etc. Let go what she did, etc. So I'm clearly dealing with a lot of deep-seated family issues. So we talk about the breakup of the family and how this affects the kids, and also we're seeing some information about how that just broke, saying that he had recently broken up with his own partner. So he had recently gone through a breakup again, but really, and the main thrust of what you see in the manifesto, and it's so long, it's so extensive, it's hard to, really just pack all of it into one program. But the one thing you see throughout is that he had a very specific desire to kill Christian children, and had, in fact, made a specific plan. These are not schizophrenic ravings. This was a clear, dedicated act to commit evil and to kill Christian children. And you see this obsession over and over and over, which can only come from a malevolent entity. And one of the things that he even wrote in there at one point was that he thought that this church would be a good target because he knew that most of the parishioners were over 55, so that they were older, and said, oh, well, since it's a parish that, they have the young kids from the school, but most of the people who would be there during the day would be older, so not a young parish, that would be potentially a security vulnerability. And I know you and I have talked so much, Evita, about young people getting back into the church, and it's never even once, because we're not demonic, it's never even once occurred to us to think that this could be a safety issue.
Yeah, no, it 1,000% is a safety issue. And Jack, what you're laying out, it's all the important context to what happened. The manifesto was overtly anti-Catholic, overtly anti-Trump also, which not everybody's been talking about. And he acted on this hatred towards Christian, a desire to kill Christian children. And for some reason, including the identity of this individual, that he's a transgender identifying man who clearly is mentally disturbed, confused about himself, but having people close to him like his mother explicitly buying into these delusions, supporting them. This is all relevant information. And for some reason, journalists are saying, we don't care about any of that. All that matters is the gun. The gun came in and the gun itself shot everybody up. And we know that's not true. There was an individual behind the gun who actually did the killing. And it's really telling that you have journalists, specifically the New York Times. If you read the New York Times op-ed on this, they will give you the context, but then say, and some people on the right are trying to seize on this and make it about transgenderism. And instead of, and it's like, no, what we're doing is we're reporting on the story. We're talking about what happened. We're looking at the motive here because he gave it to us in a manifesto. And it's really telling, I think, that so many people, including the mayor of Minneapolis, are completely disinterested in why this individual shot up a bunch of children in a church. I think it's really telling.
Well, it's so telling, but I had said this to a friend, just sort of chatting about this, and I've been on the phone on and off with just Catholic families and moms, and sat down and obviously talked with my wife about all of this, and even as I do these reports, my son is sitting in a Catholic school, so it's something that could not possibly hit closer to home. And one of the things that we dig into is that, I just happened to mention that, when you see these depictions in the past, go look at a movie like Psycho or a movie like Silence of the Lambs, and we see that even in these previous depictions in Hollywood, there is a direct connection. Hitchcock understood this. Thomas Harris understood this when he wrote Silence of the Lambs, that people who try to change their gender and change their identity are in this war with reality themselves and this war within their own psychology, and clearly are on the same path as serial killers. And these are some of the most famous, horror movies, of all time. Hannibal Lecter and Norman Bates are extremely popular, and yet not that, or I should say, not Hannibal Lecter, but it's Buffalo Bill in the film who's the trans, and yet we don't seem to consider that whenever anyone talks about this.
Well, Jack, it's funny because the Democrats, right? They're saying, "Oh, you got all the right wants to do is give up thoughts and prayers," and they're mocking prayer. Actually, what the right wants to do is address it, not just address gun violence, but address the individual that did this. Let's have a real conversation about transgenderism and mental illness and treating these individuals instead of actually supporting their delusions, which is creating the psychosis and all of these issues that we're seeing from so many transgender individuals. I mean, the suicide, depression, anxiety rates of the transgender individuals in our country they're through the roof, and we're not allowed to talk about it. And so this is, I think, an example of actually the left refusing to address the problem while they're accusing conservatives of simply giving up thoughts and prayers, which, by the way, prayer is extremely important. We need it. And we also need action. And there's nobody on the right who's saying we just need thoughts and prayers. We need action and we need prayers.
Yeah, no, we're the two-way exercisers over here on the right. And of course, the 41% of trans individuals have suicide attempts, according to studies that have come out. 41%. This is not something that we are dealing with properly. Right back, Human Events Daily.